Russia pushed for sanctions in your talks with them, and have you consulted with international partners and allies about potentially rolling back sanctions in these negotiations to end the war?
The talks with our Russian counterparts, both with my counterpart, the National Security Advisor, Secretary Rubio's counterpart, the Foreign Minister Lavrov, it really was quite broad. Focused on what is the goals for our broader relationship, but very clear that the fighting has to stop to get to any of those brighter goals.
So the negotiations haven't even started yet, and Trump's White House is talking about lifting sanctions on Russia as brighter goals.
Bruh.
But in case you need a clearer example, listen to President Trump himself.
Can you clarify what you meant in your truth today on the major economic development transactions between the U.S. and Russia? In more detail?
With respect to what, Russia?
In solving a peace deal, you said there will be major economic development transactions which will take place between the United States and Russia.
Yeah, we're trying to do some economic development deals. They have a lot of things that we want, and we'll see. I mean, I don't know if that will come to fruition, but we'd love to be able to do that if we could. You know, they have massive rare earth. It's it's actually the largest in terms of land. It's by far the largest country. And they have very valuable things that we could use, and we have things that they could use, and it would be very good if we could do that. I think it would be a very good thing for world peace and lasting peace. Our first thing that we want to do, the first element of the overall transaction is ending the war. But if, just as we're doing with Ukraine, if we could do some economic development in terms of Russia and getting things that we want, something like that would be possible, yes.
By the way, look at Macron's face while Trump is saying that. If y'all think Macron embarrassed Trump at this meeting like the mainstream media claims, you obviously weren't paying attention. Because Macron went to Washington to try to convince Trump to keep propping up Ukraine, and the orange man told him to his face in front of everybody that he's considering propping up Russia's economy in exchange for Russian rare earth minerals. In essence, he told Macron to go kick rocks. But on the topic of rare earth minerals, almost at the same time this meeting was taking place, President Putin was saying this.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, we just observed your meeting on rare earth metals. Excuse me, but I think that right now all journalists around the world are interested in rare earth metals, but from a somewhat different angle. After all, the United States, to put it very mildly, is strongly urging Zelensky to sign an agreement with them regarding these resources as payment for the aid provided to Ukraine by the previous administration, the Biden administration. How do you assess the prospects of such an agreement?
That doesn't concern us. I don't assess it in any way and don't even want to think about the topic. Of course, it would be necessary to evaluate those resources, how real they are, how much of them there are, what their value is, and so on. But I repeat, that's not our business. Our business is what we just discussed at the meeting. Rare and rare earth metals are a very important component, very important resources for modern industries. We're still doing little in this direction and need to do more. The purpose of today's meeting was to focus, at the initial stage, the administrative resources on working in this area. By the way, we would even be ready to offer cooperation to our American partners. When I say partners, I mean not only administrative and governmental structures, but also companies, if they showed interest in joint work. We undoubtedly have, and I want to emphasize this, significantly more resources of this kind than Ukraine. Russia is one of the undisputed leaders and reserves of these rare and rare earth metals. We have them in the north, in Murmansk, in the Caucasus, in Kabardino-Balkaria, in the Far East, in the Irkutsk region, in Yakutia, and in Tuva. These are quite capital-intensive investments, capital-intensive projects. We would be glad to work jointly with any foreign partners, including American ones. Yes, by the way, regarding the new territories, it's the same. We are ready to attract foreign partners there as well. In the so-called new historical territories that have returned to the Russian Federation, there are also certain reserves. We are ready to work there with our foreign partners, including American ones.
Now, I'm not a career diplomat, but what I understood is that Trump publicly stated he wants to do business with Putin. Putin publicly stated he wants to do business with Trump. And even though Trump himself said this about the sanctions,
Raising or lifting sanctions against Russia on the table is
No, we haven't lifted any sanctions on
on
anybody.
the table as part of any negotiation.
I guess it will be at some point, but right now we haven't agreed to lift sanctions on anybody.
realistically, the only way that America gets access to Russia's minerals is if Trump lifts the sanctions. What I also understood is that Trump sees the Ukraine war only as an impediment to business, and that securing a mineral deal with Russia is a lot more important to him than Ukraine. Now, I'll be the first to admit that it's very cynical on Trump's part, and it's tragic for the Ukrainian people. But on the global geopolitical scale, having a good relationship with Russia and having access to Russian rare earth minerals means that America is less dependent on China for these things. And as Pete Hegseth already stated, the Trump administration considers China as America's primary competitor, not Russia.
We also face a peer competitor in the communist Chinese, with the capability and intent to threaten our homeland and core national interests in the Indo-Pacific. The U.S. is prioritizing deterring war with China in the Pacific, recognizing the reality of scarcity and making the resourcing trade-offs to ensure deterrence does not fail.
So, at the end of the day, Trump is simply and coldly looking out for America's interests, even if those interests come at the expense of Ukraine or the European Union.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so.